Welcome to the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast. I'm Greg Drevenstedt, Editor-in-Chief at Rider Magazine. I want to wish everyone a belated Happy New Year. We took an extended break during the holidays that spilled over into January, so it's been a little over a month since we dropped our last episode. Starting with this episode, we're back on schedule to launch a new one every 2 weeks. Our guest on episode 52 is Perry Steed, and he was interviewed by Rider's associate editor, Paul Dail. Paul wrote a feature about Steed titled Riding for Light for the October 2022 issue of Rider. Steed is a former Army paratrooper, and he served in the 82nd Airborne with Sergeant Kristopher Cool. On April 24, 2012, Cool took his own life. On May 20th of last year, Steed departed Wilmington, North Carolina on his BMW R GS and embarked on a 48-state trip covering more than 15,000 miles. The purpose of his trip was to pick up Cool's ashes in Minnesota and take them to Fort Bragg to spread on Sicily Drop Zone as a rally cry for support for the epidemic of veteran suicide. During his ride, Steed met with fellow veterans he served with, as well as old friends. He spent the many hours of solo helmet time working through his own struggles as a veteran and as a husband and father. In this episode, Steed talks about how he got into motorcycles, as well as his Ride for Light mission. He's candid and honest about his ongoing challenges, which are shared by many veterans. Steed talks about Operation Purpose, the nonprofit he created to support fellow veterans. You can find out more and make a donation at operationpurpose.net. Steed completed his mission. He dispersed Sergeant Cool's ashes at Sicily Drop Zone, and Paul wrote a follow-up feature about it for the February 2023 issue of our sibling publication, American Rider. We owe a debt of gratitude to all veterans for their service, and we owe it to them to support veteran causes. If you or someone you know is in danger because of suicidal thoughts or actions, call 911 immediately. Suicide is an emergency that requires help by trained medical professionals and should always be treated seriously. Nationwide suicide hotlines, 1-800-SUICIDE and 1-800-273-TALK, have counselors available 24/7. Thanks for listening, and keep the rubber side down.
All right, well, Perry, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you here today. I wanted to, before we get into talking about Ride for Light, let's talk about you a little bit. A topic that's going to be, familiar to the majority of our readers and listeners. Tell us a little bit about how you got started riding.
Well, like a lot of kids, when some rich friend, their parents buys them a dirt bike, when we're younger. So I rode without any kind of training or skill set for a number of years. When I went into the military, a good friend of mine bought a ZX7, and that thing stayed wrecked at my house more than either one of us rode it. I rode it a little bit, and then I quickly realized that I was not mature enough to be behind the bars of a motorcycle. I took a lot of unnecessary risks, and it wasn't until 2009 that I actually started riding on my own. My father-in-law actually came from Connecticut to our home in North Carolina, and his primary mode of travel when he made these trips was on a motorcycle. And I know the readership, is an American-based readership, but he rode BMW. And so when it came time for me to get a bike, I was looking for something that I could ride more and wrench on less. And so I settled on a BMW that was actually the same year as his, as another 1984. The wrenching versus riding thing, that's not really that true. I did work on it quite a bit. I did beat the crap out of it for the first year, and put about 10,000 miles on it the first year that I was actually licensed and could ride it. So being based at that time in Connecticut, you can travel a short distance and see a whole lot of stuff. So we went all over New England, west out into Western Pennsylvania, and I kind of relegated it to that. I started taking solo trips in 2011. I started riding pretty much exclusively by myself when it came time to do any sort of distance. Not to say I didn't ride with other people. It's just I had things I needed to do. That first big trip, I just finished doing a resto mod job on that 84 Airhead of mine and put 200 miles on it and decided I needed to ride to North Carolina and actually meet the birth family that I just found. So much to the chagrin of all those that care about me, I set off on that trip. And the one thing it did was let people know that if I said I was going to do something, then I did it. I really didn't care what other people thought. I just was going to do it. I've been one of those ask for forgiveness instead of permission types of people my whole life. So I did that. Didn't really run into many issues on the road. And that time, really, I think it kind of set the tone for how I needed to process traumatic events and situations of loss. So fast forward, we moved down here in 2012, and I've made a few longer trips. Of course, being in North Carolina, there's a couple places that you really need to see if you're into motorcycles, and that's Wheels Through Time in Maggie Valley, and you need to go to the Barber Motorcycle Museum in Birmingham. So my father-in-law and I took off down there in 2015. That was the last trip that he was able to make with me, and then I've been riding pretty much by myself ever since. There's you're going to run into a lot of people that want to ride till you tell them you're going to put 400 miles on before breakfast, and then they kind of back out real quick. So a lot of miles on road, tons of miles on road. And then my last motorcycle that I purchased was a BMW GS that I actually took this trip on. And I realized that they are not dirt bikes. I grew up riding those dirt bikes, and you can just haul those things around wherever you want, body position and whatever. And when you're on something with 135 horsepower and it's a bit, that bike's huge, So I realized that I'm not as good as I thought I was off road. But this last trip, being 15,000 miles, I definitely learned really quick that I am better in a lot of situations than I thought I was. And seeing and meeting a ton of other motorcyclists on the road, that just helped strengthen my resolve to continue to ride as long as possible, because, people on two wheels, they see things a little bit differently than, people sitting behind a steering wheel. And so, yeah, group rides, a lot of individual riding though.
Okay. Now, with the BMW, you made a funny comment when we spoke back in June that for a long time you didn't drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
So besides not necessarily being a dirt bike per se, how did it treat you on the road? How'd you feel on it?
So that GS community, they're it's kind of like the Harley community. They're always hanging out at a Harley dealership, or hopping from bar to bar. The BMW GS crowd, the joke is that they've got to buy all the latest gear and then they never make it past Starbucks. So I was really reticent to get one of those bikes. It was a toss up between that and the Harley Davidson Pan America. And with it being so new, you couldn't get your hands on one. So that shut the door for the Harley for me, because I wanted to try one out. But the longevity and the durability of that GS, it reigned supreme for me. And it treated me really well overall. Like I said, treating it like a dirt bike, 3 days in, I ended up wadding it up in the mountains of North Carolina and kind of hurt myself and messed some things up. Then a little JB weld and some electrical tape, you can fix a lot of things. Didn't really have to do too much. Got squirrely in Wyoming at where is that? Bighorn State Park. So I got a little squirrely out there, and then I realized that my tires were completely bald.
Oh.
And then you think like, man, these tires aren't that old. Like, well, I've put 14,000 miles on them since I got the motorcycle, So the things that went wrong with it, putting a set of tires on it, 3 oil changes on my trip, overall, the thing did everything I asked it to do. It ran all day without fail. And, I had the intention of getting rid of it once I got back, but you share as many experiences as I've shared with that motorcycle, you just can't seem to get rid of it,
Sure. Sure.
So the stable's grown by another one, So
well, tell us again what all you've got. I know we have it in in the article that I wrote for Ryder, but give me all the steeds there.
Okay. I've got a 74 Moto Guzzi Eldorado 850. I'm actually looking at it right now. I have an 81 XS 650. That's a basket case right now, waiting on me to get motivation and funds. A pair of 1984 BMW Airheads, and I have the 05 Ultra Classic, the 2015 V-Strom 650, and then my 2013 1200 GS.
Okay. So, excellent.
Yeah.
When I see you got a Harley that looks like wheeled behind you there. Is that?
Yeah, that's the Ultra.
Excellent.
Yeah.
For our listeners who can't see that, but well, let's move on. I started with that first question and said, that's what most of our listeners and readers are going to be familiar with, but we actually just did a poll that's coming out in the February issue of Ryder. That it was a survey from 2022, and it sort of puts everybody in the categories, right? And one of those categories was that looks like at least a third of our readers are veterans or active military. And then, you bump that number up to how many of us know somebody. So let's talk a little bit about Ride for Light. I first heard about your story in June and caught up with you when you were actually in the southeast corner of my state in Utah. I did write a story about that trip that came out in the October issue. We talked about where you'd been so far, what you hope to gain. But for our listeners who haven't heard the story, tell us a little bit about it, your motivation, some of your goals. Before we started talking, you said that I caught you at the right time in June. I want to give our listeners a little bit of background and where you were at the time and what got you on the road.
Roger that. So in 2012, one of my best friends committed suicide. He was the guy I was in the service with, and his parents wanted me to bring some of his ashes back to Fort Bragg and spread them on the drop zone. And it took 10 years for me to get to the point where I could do it. I've battled a lot of my own demons, things I couldn't shake, things I couldn't get away from. My mental health was one of those things, like so many other veterans, you just put it on the back burner, and then you dilute it with alcohol, and you just dig in and find a purpose. And that never really sounded off for me as to what my purpose was after I got out of the military. And I was kind of drowning everything with alcohol and whatnot. And my family, I've got a wife and 3 kids, and they just had no way to help me other than, just be there whenever I could be there. And it was a huge strain on them. But over the past few years, I've been slowly climbing out of my hole. Not to say that I'm, making it's one step forward, some days 3 steps back, but I've been more diligent than I have with a lot of things in my life about I'm not going to go out like that. And so in 2021, I took a little trip, took a couple weeks, and went on a test ride to see if I could actually stand being on the road. I spent a couple weeks out there in, North Carolina and some Tennessee, and, just in this area. I hit 5 states, I believe. And then when I got back from that, I was like, I can do this. And then I started kind of thinking about how I was going to make it happen to ride to Minnesota, because I had to bring him home. Like I could have just gotten on an airplane and gone and done it, but it needed to be something that I had to sacrifice for him. I had to show him and his family that I was all in, that I honored and I respect him, and I needed to carry him. I needed to have him with me. And So this kind of turned into, if I'm going to, Minnesota, I'd actually had another friend that lived out in the middle of the country, and he had been turned away by, VA healthcare mental health facility because they just didn't feel like taking him, and he was in a critical phase, and the place where he turned where he could get help, they couldn't help him. So in contact with some of his family, I needed to go see him. Well, then if I'm in Oklahoma, I'm catching up with some of my friends, because the one thing that I've done since I lost Chris, we all lost Chris, is that if they pop in my head, I got to reach out to them. I've got to. I tried reaching my friend before he did that, and he was in that spot where I couldn't get to him, and if he didn't want to answer the phone, I had no other way to get a hold of him. But I wasn't going to let that dissuade me from trying, to keep making an impact and be there, just so these folks know that somebody cares about them and somebody wants to be there for them. And the double-edged sword to that is I don't ask for help myself. So I took that, I feel in some ways, because I couldn't save him, I had to try to save somebody, even if it meant like sacrificing myself, which I'm not trying to gloat about any of that. It's just, that's my mindset. So then it turned into, all right, well, who's on the way to Oklahoma? And I was talking to a friend of mine in California, and it checked me up pretty hard. I told him what I was doing. I hadn't spoken to him in quite a while, and years. And we also served together, and we knew a lot of the same folks. And he was actually filling in some of the gaps for some of the people that it's like, hey man, if you talk to this guy, you talk to that guy, and he would give me information, and then we were bouncing, where people sit reps were, where they were at in their life and what they were doing. And he asked exactly what I was doing, and I told him, I was going to get my buddy's ashes and take them back to Fort Bragg. And he asked me if I could take his brother's ashes. So still chokes me up. So just the honor that was, bestowed upon me to do that for somebody, and the fact that I hadn't seen him in so long, but we had that bond, there's still that brotherhood. And it's something you don't, it's a very rare thing to find outside of the military, unless you're, it seems like people that are putting themselves out there at, for the sake of others, there tends to be a tighter bond, and I think that's why a lot of, because the motorcycling community is a lot like that. I think that, that's just naturally why veterans gravitate towards that while they're in and after they get out as well. But it turned into, sorry to rattle on, it turned into being about buddy checks and finding those people that have kind of fallen off the radar and getting back in touch with them. And the momentum that I felt from my first positive encounter with someone that I knew, it helped propel me to go talk to the next person. And then, after a while, man, I would just see somebody in a gas station and just start, and I wouldn't tell them, I wasn't trying to solicit any money or any of that stuff. It was just, it was, they would have like a Vietnam veteran hat on, they'd have an EGA, which is the Eagle Globe Anchor. It's like the symbol of the Marine Corps, anything military or veteran on their person or on their vehicle, I would use that as an outlet to go talk to them, and so that helped me break down some of the barriers that I had built up over the years with myself, kind of sloughed off that shell of, get out of my way. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to deal with any people. And I had a person that was going to ride with me and take this trip with me. And unfortunately, they're a veteran, and because of their own personal experiences in their life, they couldn't make the journey. So they left me really quickly. what that did was, and I feel bad that they couldn't make the trip. I really wish they could have, because I know how much I got out of it, and I know it could have helped them too. But it took me 10 years to make that trip, and I can't expect anybody else to sign on for what I put in front of myself. So it allowed me to have more intimate interactions and conversations with people that I knew. And honestly, the fact that I was out there by myself, it allowed me to do it on my schedule. If I wanted to spend an extra day with someone, I'm going to spend an extra day with somebody. If I want to bypass this spot to get to somewhere else to see something else I wanted to see, I could do that. And that's really what motorcycling's about. It's about having that freedom to make your own decisions. I don't need to stay on the slab. I don't need to ride I-40, all the way out to Barstow. I can take however long I want, because this is about me as well. So the clarity that I found was also one of the hardest learned lessons, and that was being in my helmet for so long. So when I met you, I was by myself. I didn't ride very much with. I had people that hung in with me for a little bit. I had a family member that hung out with me for most of a week. I picked him up in Columbus, Georgia, and he rode with me till I hit Oklahoma. And that was a twisty turny. We didn't go straight across. And it was the first time he had actually he's actually a veteran as well, but that was the first time he had really been on any kind of distance ride. And it helped motivate him to want to do more. And so I was very, very thankful to actually have him for part of the journey with me. And I'm glad to know that it's given him some kind of positive experience. But after leaving him and picking up with the guy I needed to see in Oklahoma, we made it to Albuquerque, and then I split off from him. And then several days later, I ended up in Utah in Mexican Hat, where I actually spoke with you. And I was really feeling the weight of the mission, and I hadn't gotten it through my head yet that I just need to be in the now. It was just absorbing everybody's story. And I hadn't met or encountered even a fraction of the people that I spoke to on this trip, but it was just grinding on me, man. I mean, I was just in my head. And to kind of give some of your listeners a reason as to why I was in Mexican Hat of all places, my father-in-law, the one who actually got me into legit riding, he wanted to go back to Mexican Hat. He had been on a long trip many years ago, and it was like an oasis. I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's this little motel, and it's like shoved in the side of a mesa, and they've got cold beer and good food. It's right on the San Juan River, I believe. And he talked about how beautiful it was. The sun comes up and it hits it. It's just glows, and it's just this perfect place. So when I spoke to you, I was actually there, and I had his ashes with me. So he had died from a pretty aggressive form of cancer, and he was the patriarch of our family. And I'm not going to mince any words by saying, he's the one that really taught me what it was, how to be a family man, and I loved him dearly. And I wanted to honor him by making a stop there. And I actually spread some of his ashes in that river, knowing that was one of his favorite places. So the gravity of all that was there, and trying to, see where everything was in my head. And I don't have the skills, I'm not I'm not a mental health professional. So just trying to deal with it and just kind of keep plugging along. And I just hit this spot where I just needed to stop, because when you're talking to people, in my experience, up to that point, I spent more time listening. So as I was saying before about absorbing their stories, you don't have an outlet for your own, because I've been told that, you need to be like a passive listener. Let it just come out. So it doesn't really work for me. But when I spoke to you and we spent I think we spent a couple hours on the phone, that was one of the first real times I could actually talk about things. And I was in a bad headspace. And yeah, talking to you, I mean, everybody's going to hear your voice and they read your articles, man. You're a wordsmith. And, I knew that the man that I was talking to that day was the guy I needed to talk to. And he was the guy that could put my stuff in words and get the point across to people. So yeah, you're a blessing for me that day and have been ever since. But after Mexican Hat, man, it's just wild, man. It's just so wild being out there. And for any veteran, it doesn't matter what country you're from. When you get out of military service, you need to travel around what you fought to protect. You really do. And I had that on a bucket list when I talked to people years ago. I was like, yeah, man, when I get out of the military, I'm going to get a bike and I'm going to ride around the country. I didn't do that. I got married before I got out. I got married when I got into, not too long after I got into Fort Bragg. And when I got out, I was broke, man. I mean, I was enlisted guy. You didn't make anything in the military. And I went back to a blue collar job. So I just went back, put my nose down and just kind of went inside my head and just kind of kept doing the thing day in and day out. And I didn't take a minute and breathe and see what was out there. And I think the kids coming up today, I think they're a lot better maybe at doing that, but photographs do not do this country justice at all. And it is such a beautiful place. I mean, your state of Utah is a phenomenal state. It looks a lot different than North Carolina, and I'm looking at that map behind your head, and it's like, I went all of those places, and people ask me all the time, what was your favorite spot? Where would you like to go back to? I was like, all of them. Except, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know how many people read this magazine or listen to this from Kansas, but, I could probably bypass that one, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time there. I'm sure there's some really beautiful places there too. But yeah, that's kind of where I was, when I got to Mexican Hat, and from there it was, Lord, went down in through Hurricane, it went into Vegas, came back through Kingman, down into Scottsdale to Florence, to Yuma, to the Salton Sea, to Joshua Tree, to Carlsbad, California. Hung out there with my daughter for Father's Day. That was wonderful. That was a big surprise, being able to see her. And then, I mean, crazy traffic, in California, so that was the first time I'd been in the Mojave Desert, for training and stuff, but I'd never ridden in California traffic. So to be on a motorcycle and be on the 5 and then the 405. Holy smokes. There weren't that many motorcyclists on that road for good reason. It's ridiculous. So once I hit the Santa Monica Pier, I was never that far off of the Pacific Ocean. And I did turn around and go south on the Pacific Coast Highway, because that you need to ride south to be as close to the Pacific Ocean as you can be without falling in the water. So I have friends of mine from California, and they tell me that's what you got to do. You really haven't ridden as close to the Pacific unless you're heading south. Yeah, from there, I went up and spent some time in Oregon and bounced over into Washington. Spent some time in Idaho, in McCall, very beautiful area. Those people go hard in the paint up there, because I think, they're all outdoorsy because they only got 3 months to do it. It's ridiculous how the weather changes. Very, very impressed with all the big plains states as far as just how big the sky is. They say Wyoming's big sky country, and they're not lying. They're not lying. But after I left Idaho, it was really about, making those miles count until I got to Minnesota. When I got to Minnesota and got to my friend's parents' house, I didn't know what to do. I had spoken to my dad, as I was bebopping around through these woods and stuff and kind of taking my time almost because I didn't really want to get there because I didn't know what to expect. So it was the apprehension was making me dawdle a little bit. And I mean, if you're going to dawdle, you might as well dawdle on a motorcycle anyway, So I talked to him. He told me he was proud of me and everything. And then I pulled in their driveway and I spent the next few days talking to them about their son, filling in a lot of blanks and them filling in some blanks and, got a much larger appreciation for his family that I knew of and knew for so many years, but I didn't know. And they helped give me some more insight as to their son, because when you go in the military, or anything, you show up freshman in college, you can kind of invent yourself to whoever you want to be, and no one really knows. But there's just pieces of his life that were guarded, just like there's pieces of my life that are guarded. And while they really weren't betraying any kind of confidence or anything that he wouldn't want to have out there, there was just things in his life that he glossed over that actually helped me realize who he really was. And, in contrast, I did the same thing for them. Wonderful family, very gracious, very generous, and much welcome respite from the road. Then I took a break. I came home, flew back home to Wilmington for a week for my daughter's birthday, her 10th birthday. I'd been telling her since, Oregon that I wasn't going to be home in time. And she kept her chin up, but she was pretty upset, that she didn't want me to be gone anyway. It's my 9-year-old then. And so I surprised her, by coming home for her a few days before her birthday. And the night before her birthday, my father died. So that was I hate to say it like that, but it really soured like everything. It just took something that was to be a positive break in my trip and turned it completely upside down. And so the only thing I knew to do, and in retrospect wasn't the best thing, the morning after the memorial, I flew back up to Minnesota and I started riding again. Then I started to crash, not physically, but emotionally. I started to crash. It was sobering, the isolation that I found it so easy to put myself back into. It parallels what so many veterans go through, and it's nothing different than me being around my family. I can isolate myself and be just as alone, but I can see people, I can see who's around me and they're there if I need them. When I'm out there on the road, you got to face your stuff, you got to own it. So I do have a person that I talk to. So I talked to that guy and he could tell I was getting in my head. So he just asked me, he's like, where are you at now? And I told him, said, what's that town known for? I was like, man, I don't know. He said, you're riding through all these places. You don't know anything about them? I was like, that guy's got a great point. He said, it's about being in the now. He said, focus on the now, the mission that you're on. Anybody would love to go on this trip, but until they get on it, and then they realize what it's all about. And the overwhelming reality is most of the people are never going to go on this kind of trip, and the story that you walk away from might be how you sucked it up and you made it through it, and it was only because you saw all these awesome things and you got an appreciation for the country that you served, to protect. But, these little towns, you served to protect them too. And you should know where you were at. So I started paying more attention to that. And then that actually, and being more observant to my surroundings, and trying to let that chaff just fall away from what had been going on, because I just had to make that realization that that crap's going to be there. I just need to enjoy, or try to enjoy as much as I can about where I'm at, and gain the appreciation that I sought to achieve from the ride in the first place. And so I almost feel like I'd done myself a disservice, like for 3/4 of my trip, like I wasn't doing what I needed to do. So and because we just live in such an awesome country, like I feel like I need to do it again. Like the first trip was just like a rough end for me doing the real one, and but there's still a lot of work to be done out there. I met a lot of people that are going through the same stuff that I am. I met a lot of people that aren't asking for help, that don't want to talk to anybody, and whether it was, some of these people are down and out, and whether it was putting a tank of gas in some old veteran's car at the gas station, or paying for some guy's food that's, that's just looks like he's just not doing okay. I felt like that helped me, that pay it forward, because once I looked at it in a different light, the people that I was encountering, whether their stories are bad or good, they were paying for it because they were trusting me with a piece of themselves. So I owe it to those folks to keep pushing, to keep carrying on, and trying to keep helping people. But the ride itself, oh my gosh, is the most amazing thing ever. And I know why people do it. I know why people endurance ride. I know why people decide to ride across country every year. I know why people bomb out to Sturgis. Sturgis is awesome. Like, that whole area is so beautiful, and there's so much to do out there. And I actually got tires in Sturgis, and thankfully all the craziness wasn't going on. But it's a wonderful area. It's a wonderful area to visit and to sightsee. And I highly recommend Custer State Park. Riding through there. Watch out for the buffalo.
Right.
Yeah. But just some of the views coming around some of those corners, and they've got the trees cut out, and then you can see Mount Rushmore in the distance. It's amazing. But it's a beautiful, beautiful country. And, I honor everyone that's ever fought for it, for us to be able to go on these trips and see these things. It's so fantastic. And you definitely get a different appreciation from being in a car. It's definitely, I mean, everybody that reads this, and you as well, and everybody that's listening, it's just that raw experience. That's why people in motorcycles are usually pretty happy. It's because it's just, you're free. So now I can actually say I've done that. And it's addictive. It makes you want to keep going.
So maybe another trip in the works. I think you had mentioned that when we emailed kind of recently, or maybe planning the next one.
Correct. That is something that right now there's, while we're in the conceptualization phase of this whole thing, after I got back, there was a pretty big showing for, I felt really undeserving for the attention that I got when I got back, and there's probably 70 to 80 motorcycles that escorted me back into town. And there's a American Legion post here that post 129, and every one of their riders showed up. Now they have a fledgling rider program, but there's still 17 motorcycles, like the entire contingent showed up. So being in New Hampshire, I had a lot of support from the American Legion up there. So I felt really compelled to join the Legion here and help bolster their numbers and to help foster their mission. And the great thing about that is they have such a, there's a huge network. It's nationwide. So as far as a ride, really wanting to get other people involved. I don't want to necessarily spend 3 months on the road. again, away from my family, but I do want to ride, around the country again. I feel like I can do it in a lot quicker time, because if you look at the time I spent on the road, it was actually less than half of the time that I was gone. I spent more time with folks, and that was the real mission, was to spend time with people. But make it a relay. That's the concept right now, is to make it a relay and utilize Patriot riders and then other veteran motorcycle clubs and stuff that want to help carry a torch, and continue that awareness for veteran suicide and veterans mental health. And it's in the news a lot. Veteran suicide, it's everywhere, and rightfully so. Suicide has touched everybody, and it's for a veteran, they're more than twice as likely to commit suicide than someone that hasn't served. And it's because we lose our mission. So one thing that this ride taught me, was that the mission can also be about me, and I think anyone who helps out or signs on or takes a ride with another veteran, or they can find some kind of peace and recapture some of that camaraderie that's been missing. Mm-hmm. So I feel that another ride is definitely important, not just for me, but for those people that I came in contact with on the road that expressed interest about tagging along if something else happened. I even had someone who read the Rider article. They reached out to me, and they said if I did it again, then they wanted to ride, at least part of the Pacific Northwest with me. So that's awesome. That's kind of, you want to be a spark, and I feel that there's enough interest out there to where we can actually make something else happen again.
Talk a little bit about that. Before we started the interview, you said that you had kind of maybe changed the mission a little bit at this point. And I know you got your nonprofit, your 501c3 for Operation Purpose, operationpurpose.net. I'll go ahead and plug that for you. We'll do it again, and we'll put some of those links on the web post when we put this up as well. But so it sounds like things have shifted a little bit. Tell me is that part of where this shift is going? Putting some focus, some resources towards that as well, or is that just kind of ancillary and just something you'd really like to see happen?
So the Ride for Light was a call to action to get my buddy Kristopher Cool's ashes back home to Fort Bragg. But like along the way, like I was telling you before, it just turned into a higher calling. So that's where Operation Purpose came in. And when we went ahead and applied for our nonprofit, because we want to help people in the coastal North Carolina, specifically around Wilmington, North Carolina area. And I wanted to create more or less a safe place. Well, I wanted to create a safe place for veterans and their families to congregate and to hang out and to feel no pressure. A lot of these places where you come to congregate, they're centered around alcohol or a meeting of some sort. And people don't want to deal with a meeting. They don't want to have to go somewhere every time and just talk about things, talk about what they don't want to talk about. So even if it's just a card table and 4 chairs and some guys can come together and play spades every week, that's where 4 guys can have camaraderie. I just want to be able to have a no pressure zone. That is my ultimate vision. Obviously there's a lot of logistics involved. So I've always wanted to help people, with their mental health. And I know that there's at-risk people every day, whether it be veterans or law enforcement and first responders. So in Wilmington, there are a lot of places that are already in place to handle these types of things. Well, I didn't know about it. Well, once I got back from my trip and started trying to dig in and do some more, because it's almost a dark art trying to navigate where to find these specific organizations. You find people that post on, Facebook or Instagram, any kind of social media. It's like you could look at a page and then or just type in something in a search engine, and then you get funneled all this stuff. Well, that's cool, but it doesn't tell you what you need to do, where you need to be in your area. A big focus was the crisis counseling for me, because when a veteran typically puts that plan into motion, you've got an hour to intervene. And sometimes they'll reach out if they get the door slammed in their face or someone hangs up on them or tells them to hold. They just figure, it's their last mission and they're not going to fail that mission. So I don't want people to get to that frame of mind. I know personally I've been there quite a lot, and it's not everybody's got an awesome wife and 3 awesome kids like I do. But the networking in nonprofits and interest organizations, it's not that greatest. It's really not. It is. It's not something that, if you have a nonprofit and it's like whitewater rafting for veterans, and I have a nonprofit and it's underwater basket weaving for veterans. We don't talk to each other. You might get a guy comes on a whitewater rafting trip. He's like, man, I would love to learn how to underwater basket weave. And then you get these organizations, these larger ones, and everybody knows who they are. They call them silo organizations, where if they're not getting all the attention and all the money and all the funding and all the glory, they don't want to help. So my focus has always been about the veterans, but I want to help create the network in our area to start with, to place veterans where they can get the help. There are actually nonprofits in this area that handle mental health and crisis counseling for veterans and their families free of charge. They don't have to pay anything. They don't have to be in the VA healthcare system. They don't have to do that. So there's things involved. If veterans need help with paying their power bill, if they need help with transportation, if they need that creative outlet, if they want to go ruck with somebody or run with somebody, they don't know where to turn. The network side of things is where I think is lacking. And that's the gap that I want to fill, is to be the conduit to help get these organizations talking to each other and maybe tear down some of these silos and regain the focus that it needs to be about the veterans. That's what it got started for. That's what these organizations more often than not got started for, was to help the veterans. So I want to bring veteran well-being and taking care of us back into focus.
Okay.
So that has become more prevalent to me than just getting the counseling side. Once I started figuring out that these things are in place already, but the problem is there's a lot of smoke screen. When you type in something, you'll find on a search engine that, a couple of these big names will pop up, and then it takes a long time to drill down and find out where you're at in your area. And not everybody wants to go show up at an event and start asking questions. Hey man, where can I talk to somebody? They just stand off. A lot of veterans stand off from the distance, and they observe from an overwatch position. And if they don't see something that automatically attracts their attention, a lot of times they'll just go back and they'll stay in their lane, and they'll just go back to their house and, drink beer and play Xbox or, whatever it is they've been doing. So focus, definitely the thing that hasn't changed is being about the veterans. The thing that has changed is utilizing the things, not trying to reinvent the wheel, trying to create a better transmission to get all the wheels working together. That's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Excellent. Boy, you answered a lot of my questions before I could ask.
Just natural talking to you, man. It's just.
So next ride, what's do you have any short rides just in the near future, just to get out and about?
Actually, I do. And I'm not taking my motorcycle.
Oh, okay.
So
we won't talk about it.
No, there's an organization called the Motorcycle Relief Project. I don't know if you've heard of it. He's based out of Arizona. They're based out of Arizona and Colorado. It's a motorcycle relief project. Okay. And I encourage you to look the guy up. His name's Mike Bobbitt. He's a retired 30-year Air Force veteran. And you go through an application process. And I don't know how much of this you want to end up putting on the broadcast, but he helps organize off pavement riding for veterans with PTSD. So I was connected to him, kind of navigated to him through a couple actually different avenues, and I went through the application process and I was accepted. So at the end of February, I fly out to Tucson and I'll be on another 1200 GS for a week, and I'll get to ride off pavement. I didn't have any idea what it was all about. So he's kind of laughing at me. It's a little funny little story. When I was talking to him, I was like, all right, man, I need a pack out list. I need to know what I need to bring. I got my tent, got my sleeping mat, I got my bag, I got all my stuff. And he's like, no. It's like, I'm an Air Force veteran. I'm not sleeping on the ground. So we stay in a lodge at night and we go out for these rides during the day. And it's about team building, and it's about, being around other people that have similar experiences. And then there's seminars, and you can find Motorcycle Relief Project on YouTube. I actually didn't look it up until last night, and I actually got pretty choked up, just the honor of being elected to be a part of this thing. But there's classes and seminars on how to deal with PTSD, and deal with trauma, and the fact that, because you feel like once you're done with the military, it's kind of like, I don't even know what I need to do. And hats off to the guys that can segue straight from military life into civilian life. My BS meter is just, there's a whole nother echelon to my BS meter. And I've been able to turn that off and just smile and nod and get on about my business. So I've had a bit of a rough time, assimilating, but that it is my hope. I'm not going to put any expectations as far as Trump, elevating this thing up to something that it might not turn out to be. But, it'll be probably what I put into it and what I'll get out of it. But, I'm hoping that this will help, maybe help me regain some clarity as far as, because I just got so much in my head right now from where I was at, and all the things I went through, and then the losses that I had over this summer, and then this fall that I spoke with you about. And then I really hope that this, because I'm telling you, it looks like a wonderful project. And who knows, I might come back and decide I want to ride all over again. And I want to, fundraise just for that. There's so many good people out there trying to do good things to try to help us, and it's brothers and sisters helping brothers and sisters, and then, compassionate, understanding people like yourself, that you see a need, and then you want to help get that message out there, whether it be through, a spoken word or written word, or just increase awareness through social media, so that is the first ride, is my February ride.
And how many guys are, people, we'll say, are on that?
There's
do they
4
accept for that?
There's 4 volunteers. So it's there's a mechanic type guy, and then 3 other personnel. Mike is also involved in the day-to-day ride. I think he's just part of everything. Okay. And then there's 8 riders.
Okay.
So keep it small. It's right. A full fleet of 1200 GSs, and you go through maintenance stuff every morning, and then a pre-ride brief, kind of tell you where you're going for the day and what you're doing, and you ride out to some place, have lunch, and hang out, and you come back. And from what I've seen on the YouTube videos from the kind of like a post ride interviews from some of the folks that have attended this thing, seems like it's pretty life changing for them. So I definitely this summer I will be doing another ride, off road, more off road than off pavement. Trying to get lined up with some classes because I want to do a BDR.
Okay.
So they got the Mid Atlantic BDR here. They got the New England BDR that they just opened up, and then of course everybody does all the other BDRs, and then they do the I forget if it's the Idaho BDR. I think it's the last one people do. That's the one that you can't do on my bike. It's like a serious dual sport dirt bike kind of ride, and I would love to build up to that. Pavement riding, I'll tell you, man, I'm right there with doing another ride around this country. It all depends on if I do it solo or if people are with me on how much I can knuckle down and help get this word out. I put this thing together. The one I did last year, I put it together. I think I started in March working on it. So it kind of came together pretty quick, and I'd like to see what more preparation can net us. I have some really talented people and gifted people with organization and fundraising and just coordinating all the things on my side now. And I'm so very fortunate to be surrounded by such outstanding individuals. One of the guys that I saw on my trip, his brother, he lives here, and he's all about it. He's helping me. He's a great guy. He's in contact with all the right people and doing all the right things. And I really like the fact that he doesn't have any problem with calling me up and saying, "Hey man, what are you doing? Have you done this? Have you done that?" I'm like, man, because I'm the attack the hill guy. If you're like, "Perry, I just need you to run up that hill and knock down everything that's standing." I'm like, cool, man, I got you. I'll go up there, I'll knock everything down on that top of that hill. But sometimes I get bogged down by my own stuff. There's so many ideas running around in my head. It's like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go now. And then I won't even have enough common sense to walk back down the hill. I'll just kind of stand up there and wait for somebody to tell me what to do. So another ride is definitely in the works. I've even got people that have bought motorcycles since I've been on this trip, and I ran into them.
Wow.
Because I was telling them about just how awesome it is, and yeah, you can ride down the road in your car with your windows down, but it's not the same thing as riding around a town at like 7:30 in the morning, honing where you're going by the smell of the bacon. You're finding a good place to eat with your nose, or just the senses, the air pressure change, and the dropping down into a little valley, and the wind and it getting a little crisp outside, or being a little bracing yourself and grabbing a hold of your tank, when you hit a nice steep crosswind, that lovely sting when the rain's hitting you at 80 miles an hour and just tearing your neck up, So it's just awesome on two wheels. You know what I mean?
Well, I can't think of a better way to wrap up than that. So awesome on two wheels. Well, and I know you say you sometimes you run up the hill and then you just kind of stand there, but I think you're a leader. I think you're doing great work, and I think I found your mission, and it started out with something that you needed to do, and it's continued to be, in a larger sense, something you need to do for other folks, and still for yourself, it feels like. So
Roger that.
So I appreciate it, Perry, and I know we've got a lot of readers who appreciate what you're doing, and from a personal standpoint, and I appreciate what you're doing.
I always want to thank you for the opportunity to spread my message. Your support over this trip like I said, man, you got no idea how much that meant to me. And the fact that, the article that came out in Rider was well received. It's a wonderful article. You don't have to ride an American motorcycle to appreciate your words for sure. Cause that was, man, it's fantastic. I'm blown away. And, the fact that we, through our words and our actions, we can make a positive impact in other people's lives, and while I can be out there doing the things, sometimes, it helps to have somebody tell the story too. And so the opportunity that you've given me to help reach more people is I can't thank you enough.
Glad to do it. So,
yeah, man.
Well, anything else you'd like to say? And we'll put a link to Operation Purpose. Anything else you'd like to add, or?
No, just for you. The website. I'm one of those hard-nosed guys, and I feel like I got to do it all by myself. So I'm working on the website still. I mean, it's up, and I'm making some changes to it. I don't know how long it's been since you've looked at it. I'm changing some things, updating it, uploading some stuff. I'd started a kind of a YouTube channel for Ride for Light, and I'm going to be doing more of that and trying to do more with the blog.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find that balance. Like I told you, I'd kind of gone into hibernation mode when I got back. It's time to get it all out. I've had some time to reflect on some things, and it's time to really put it out there for people. I've had people ask me if I was going to write a book about my trip, and just about like trip in a larger sense, how the whole thing has gone on. And it's not out of the scope either, so I just would like to, it's not going to be, I would love Neil Peart status. You know what I mean? Because I've read his books, and I read one of his books in preparation for the trip, just to try to get my head right. I don't know if you've read it, but
no, I didn't. I guess actually I did. I think I did know. My brother was a big fan. But I had forgotten until you just now mentioned it. So
yeah, like Rush was a fantastic band, but I wouldn't say I'm like I've never been gaga over him, and I didn't really even know Neil Peart Road until before my trip, and so I've read his book, and I gotta tell you, there's something humbling about the open road for sure, and I really feel that once you can get your head right, man, it's you can find some healing out there, and that's what it took for him. And I feel like my healing is continuing. I feel like I found a lot on my trip, but I feel like we're moving on to the next phase. So website's being updated pretty regularly. People want to donate, it's on there. I'm going to be changing the merch up. I got to get the Ride for Light stuff kind of second stage for the Operation Purpose, working on a logo for that. And we're going to start fundraising again for helping get the database going. And, I just can't wait to see where we go next, and just the fact that I've got strong people on my side, and then definitely strong supporters such as yourself. It helps me when I get down in the dumps or feel like I'm not making enough progress to have people that are still supporting me and still in my corner. You know what I mean?
Well, we'll keep talking.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, man.
For sure.
This ain't a one and done thing, man. Nope. I'm going to keep bugging you.
Well, I will be very curious to hear about the motorcycle relief project too. And so we'll, if not before, we'll connect again then and love to hear some more about that. And that's actually been on my list. And I know you got to run here shortly, but I've been looking at a few different groups like that actually. So I'd
really?
love to, yeah. And you actually going to something like that would be a great segue. So,
well, and then, I'm all about telling people about these positive experiences of what I've been through, and it definitely helping other folks. And I just look forward to hearing this interview and to read the article, the next in American Writer. And and definitely thank you and thank all everyone at those two publications. I just really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'll pass that along. So
cool, man.
All right, Perry. Well, you have a good rest of your day and weekend, and we'll be in communication soon.
All right, I'm sending you a text message right now.
Excellent.
Like right this minute. Is your 406?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was Montana for about 7 years. I just never got a new phone. So
I understand. All right. This is a picture of the Moto Guzzi.
There it is. Whoa. Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a really cool story around that motorcycle. And I'll leave this with you. So my father-in-law had that 84 R8 R100 RT, put tons of miles on it. Well, him and his brother shared a house in South Windsor, Connecticut, and they lived next door to somebody, and it looked like they never took care of their house. It was like always unkept. And what it was there was an old woman. They never saw this person, but Dad's always working tons of hours. His brother's working tons of hours. Like, when on the weekends, he was off riding motorcycles. He was never there. So one day, they've got to move. Harry, his brother and him, they sold the house. Like, his brother's getting married to this chick, and Dad's found another place to live. And so they got their stuff out in the yard. They got their motorcycles out, and they're like loading up trailers and trying to get the heck out of Dodge. Well, so they noticed that the barn is the barn doors are open on the garage in the back of the next door neighbor's house. And they didn't think a whole lot of it. So this weird looking dude walks over to him and says, "Hey man, you guys like motorcycles?" And so Dad's like, "The fuck you think, man? Like, we got motorcycles sitting out here, and so Dad, being tactful, doesn't say that. He says, of course, he said, "Well, I've got an old motorcycle over here. I'd like somebody to look at." So Harry's like, his brother's like, "I don't want to talk to this guy." And Dad's like, humors the guy. He's like, "All right, I'll come over and look at it." So he walks over there, and that Moto Guzzi's sitting there. But it had like an old Wixom fairing on it, and it had like a slab seat with a Mexican blanket stitched on it. It had an old Dodge truck hood ornament bolted to the front fender that I actually had sitting up there on my bookshelf. And he's like, now mind you, that picture that I sent you doesn't have the side covers on it, because I put in a Dyna ignition on it probably this weekend, but it didn't have those bags. But so he starts asking him questions about it and everything. And he's like, I just really want to get rid of it. I'm just, figuring, I could just, somebody could come get it. I don't have to move it. He's like, the bike hadn't moved in years. So he's like, all right, well, he's like taking a note of like what it is, because he knows anybody that has BMWs, they know Moto Guzzi people, and so he starts asking questions. All right, so how much you want for it? He's like, well, I'll take 2 for it. And Dad's like, all right, 2,000. He's like, no, 200. He's like, I'll be right back. So he goes and gets a couple $100 and comes back, and he's like, and I'm trying to push this thing across this soft Connecticut ground, and it's all, both tires are flat. And it's like, so the guy and his brother's helping him get it back across the road, to his house. And he's like, I'm in the middle of moving. What the fuck am I going to do with the motorcycle? So he puts about $600 or $700 into it, kind of cleans it up, gets rid of a bunch of bull crap, puts that solo seat on it and everything. And then he wins every show that he puts it in. So the bike at this point has been completely gone through. Those jugs back in the day, they were all chrome lined cylinders. So it's not a matter of if they go bad, it's when they go bad. Well, he had it go bad. So, and it's actually got Nicosil line cylinders on it now. The 74s had a screen instead of a filter. Well, starting in 75, the beginning of the Tonti frames, they went to a screw-on filter in the pan. So he's had that block machined to accept a later model pan. transmission's been redone, and it was a California police bike.
Huh.
So yeah, because it doesn't have the ambassador dash, and it used to have some extra wiring on it, I guess for like radios and stuff, and it originally it had the radio rack on the back. But yeah, so that is the jewel right there.
That's excellent.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So
pretty.
yeah, she's a pretty girl. She's attractive though. She is a tractor. That thing handles worse than this freaking Ultra behind me. You know. So, but cool, Paul. Thank you.
All right,
man.
Yeah. Good talking to you live. It's been real good.
In color.
Sure. I know, crazy.
Yeah. I hear
we'll have to talk more about those things hanging up on the wall behind you next. So
all my skateboards. Yeah, man. Yeah.
I'll have to show those to my boy. He's just starting to get into it. So
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got man, I've got like autographed magazines. I mean, I've got tons of stuff in here, man. And I mean, I've got this is like my little man cave, you know. So it's like I got motorcycles in here, I got toolbox and TV and all kinds of shit. So this is like where I come to hang out.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing it when I get out on the East Coast. So
bring it. Mi casa, su casa. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Hell yeah, man.
All right, brother. Well, you have a good afternoon. And,
you do the same, man.
I'll keep you posted when this goes up.
Yeah, man. No worries. And all my best to you guys.
Cool. Thank you, man. You too.
All right, brother.
All right, Perry. We'll talk to you soon.
Man. Goodbye.
If you've enjoyed listening to the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast, please subscribe, leave us a positive rating, and tell your friends. We also encourage you to visit ridermagazine.com, where you can get the latest in motorcycle news and reviews and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You can also subscribe to print and digital editions of Rider Magazine, which is published 12 times a year. Thanks again for listening.